How has this consistent meditation practice personally affected you mentally, emotionally, physically over the years?
I think for me, it's given me a lot of clarity. The main thing I notice when I'm meditating is as thoughts lessen, as that peace increases, part of that comes back with you. And so when I meet with people at the clinic, they're so agitated. You sit in a room with them and it's so loud. You can feel it, all of their thoughts, all of their worries, all of everything. And so I think if anything, the meditation has made me far more resilient.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 Strength and Health Authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode here on the Strong by Design podcast. So great to have you. Another conversation that I think will be extremely interesting. It's a topic that we haven't touched on in quite a long while here on the podcast. And our guest today has quite a story to tell. And I'm sure our conversation is going to go off in several directions, as I'll have a lot of real-time questions. And I'm excited for you to hear what our guest Scott has to share with you today. Certainly want to just take a quick second to say thank you so much for coming back and listening to the podcast as a return listener. We really appreciate your support, and just continue to share it with people that you know in your circle. Share it with friends and family members, coworkers, anybody you can think of that'll benefit from all of the different types of conversations that we have here. Obviously, we talk about all things here on Strong by Design. One week to the next can sound and look very different because body, mind, and spirit conversations really is kind of a wide-ranging category for us. There's really no conversation that we shy away from if it's interesting and worth having. So we thank you for coming back. And if you're a new listener, welcome to Strong by Design. You're in for another really good one. You can go back and listen to hundreds and hundreds of past episodes here on the podcast. So many terrific men and women that have shared their journeys, their expertise, and their golden nuggets, which I think people are really loving. And I love the feedback. I just had my brother tell me just the other day, he texted me. He said, I finally listened to that Kirk Cameron episode that you guys did, and shared it with my mother-in-law. She loves him, and she really liked it too. And so, I get feedback from people quite a bit by text, which is always great to know that people are listening. And so every listener is important to us. So thank you for that in advance. And so our very special guest today, Mr. Scott Paglia, and he has quite a story to tell. We had a conversation a few weeks back just to firm up what we were going to be talking about today, and I got to know him a little bit better, and I was really just fascinated by his story, his journey. He got into acupuncture and herbs because he almost died in South Korea some years back, and the failure to treat his condition in Western medical settings led him to Korean and Chinese medicine. And he went from a person that was on the brink of running one of the busiest clinics in North America, which is pretty fascinating. And meditation is why he ended up in South Korea. Actually, he wanted to spend time in the temples there to figure out if that's what he wanted to do in his life, to practice that type of lifestyle. And along the way, he met many, many great teachers that he'll be no doubt talking about today. He actually has been into meditation since he was a middle school kid, which is a bit different, right? Not a lot of middle schoolers walking around meditating. But he continues to do that to this day. And he's focused most of his studies on neuroplasticity and the effect meditation has on the nervous system, and runs a clinic out in Washington. And so I'm just really interested in knowing more about Scott's journey and some of his near-death experiences, if you will, in his lifetime. So, Scott, it's really a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for making time to be on Strong by Design.
Oh, man, thank you for having me. It should be fun.
I think so, too. So, first off, share a little bit more about your personal journey just coming into this type of this Eastern kind of medicine seeking that happened for you some years back, and how it's evolved over the last few decades.
Sure. So I was born in upstate New York, and we lived on this dirt road, and you'd go down this dirt road, and we had no cable TV or anything, so we had one of those old school antennas. And the only TV station we would really get was Channel 5. And so on the weekends, my parents would let me watch an hour of like Kung Fu theater. And so
I remember.
That was it. It was like cartoons and then Kung Fu theater. And since that was pretty much my only contact with the outside world, right, was Kung Fu theater, I started fooling around with martial arts on my own. And then oddly enough, I was just really interested in like this meditation thing. Like, what are these guys doing? And so I would go out into the woods. Like, I was raised old school. My parents would just like on Saturdays, just like line up the shotguns, put out the cereal and say, you guys have fun while they were sleeping. And then I would just hike into the woods all the way in. And then I would sit there in the forest and I would try to meditate. I had no idea what I was doing, what was supposed to happen, but I just kept coming back to it. And it was just very odd, and I couldn't figure it out. And one thing, though, that I did figure out is, that internal voice that everyone hears. It was very loud when I was meditating.
That voice, that inner voice that we all have in our own head, right? That a lot of people don't make time for because the pace of life, the distractions of life, we're not listening to that voice very well. But you, from a very young age, were hearing this voice and kind of giving yourself the solitude to hear it. Interesting.
Yeah, because the message was always so concrete. It was just very loud, and it was like, you are going to do something important. And I would just hear that, and I would say, okay, what is it? I didn't realize at the time that was it.
Wow.
The quieter you are, the louder that voice gets. Like yesterday. So I'm in Bellingham, Washington, and it's Sakura, so it's cherry blossom season, right? And so I was walking. I walked with my wife and my daughter to school. They live about 15 minutes, or they go to school 15 minutes away. So anyways, I was going up the hill, and I look up into a cherry blossom, and then, there's no other way to say it, but it was like I went into that cherry blossom, and then I dispersed through the entire line of trees up and down this hill, and then I found myself walking again, and I just heard this very loud voice saying something. It was basically, while the opportunity for comebacks are endless, the energy required is exponential. And I thought, okay, so I wrote that down. And when I got to work, a patient came in, another pandemic casualty. His son killed himself during the pandemic. And he was just sitting there in tears. And I just spoke to him what I heard. And he just stopped everything. And he said, do you think I can come back? And I said, I know you can. You're already here. Let's do that.
Wow. Unbelievable.
So, yeah, I couldn't understand what that was, but when I saw him there, I was just like, this is it. And it was really interesting because like that shifted what needed to happen. As a parent, I can't imagine that agony. And I've been with him since, the day after.
No, I can't imagine that. I'm sure most people listening couldn't. Certainly parents of any children couldn't imagine what that feels like, looks like, nor do we want to even consider it as something that I've lost my brother and my mother to some difficult forms of cancer, brain tumors, things like that, and that enough was trying. And really tested my faith and my wits and my strength and everything else. But a child is a whole different thing.
Mhm. Yeah,
Just
what I witnessed
unbelievable.
in the clinic is that's the one
Yeah.
people may or may not come back from.
And how interesting that you do see, and we're going to get to this obviously as we talk, but you see lots of different issues people are coming to you with, right?
Yes.
For help, seeking help in this realm of acupuncture and healing and stuff. And they're coming to you for physical stuff, obviously emotional stuff, mental, and kind of a blend even of those things. And so that's truly fascinating. That it's almost like you're hearing this voice that you've been hearing from since you were young, and it's in real time you're seeing its usefulness, and that's pretty profound.
It's
Interesting.
pretty humbling, It's just,
Yes.
and then, most people hear this stuff, but they don't pay attention to it because they think it's weird, and they certainly don't voice it. And then the less you pay attention to it, the quieter it gets. But, on the flip side is when you listen to this voice, it doesn't mean everything's going to work out. It's like people of faith who have deep belief as long as things are good. When things go off the hook, then you hear this, why is God abandoning me or torturing me? But if you study St. John of the Cross, he said basically, it's in adversity that we do our most profound work for God. I always remember that. I learn a lot.
Funny, because we do daily huddle. I've talked about this before in our podcast. It's no secret. Here at Critical Bench, we meet a lot. We have daily huddles, and then we have weekly team meetings. Like any business, you have to have really strong communication amongst your team members and leaders. And in my daily huddle, one of the things that we are to share is a lesson. And it could be a quote. It could be just a learned, something that just hit you hard that morning or whatever. But my lesson today was that adversity is really a growth opportunity, and we should see it for what it is, and embrace it in a way, because it's in the adversity of life and those hardships and challenges that's where we really find ourselves and see what we're capable of, and overcoming. But it's not easy for people, certainly. How has this consistent meditation practice personally affected you mentally, emotionally, physically over the years? Like, obviously it has, right? It's been part of who you are since you were quite young. What can you speak on about that?
I think for me, it's given me a lot of clarity. It's like the main thing I notice when I'm meditating is as thoughts lessen, as that peace increases, part of that comes back with you. And so when I meet with people at the clinic, they're so agitated. You sit in a room with them and it's so loud. You can feel it, all of their thoughts, all of their worries, all of everything. And so I think if anything, the meditation has made me far more resilient, because I don't necessarily, now this is not a popular Western idea, but one of the monks taught me, he said, the worst thing you guys do in the West is confuse yourself with your thoughts.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting thing a concept.
Totally, right? That was just like, I was in my 20s at this poor monastery tormenting these monks like I used to do to the priests, because I've always wanted to figure out, why am I here? What are we doing? And, I'd badger these guys with thousands of questions instead of actually meditating. But I asked him, I said, what does that actually mean? And he says, okay, think about you 2 or 3 years ago. All right. have you grown or not grown as a person? And I said, well, I hope I'm growing. And he says, that's impossible for you to believe 100% in what you used to be. You have to adapt and evolve and grow. He says, think about 10 years ago. He says, you can't tell me you believe the same things and do the same things. And I said, no. He says, so who are you? The person that was thinking a year ago? The person that's thinking now? The person that's thinking 50 years from now? He says, these thoughts just come into your head and you guys actually think they mean something more. Because in their concept, it's like we are very much like, if you look at our Western ideal, right? You know, the thinking guy like that.
Yeah.
They look at that and they think, what a profound sadness. His head is bent to the world and he has to support his head with his own hand. But we pay homage to the thoughts, right? That's our whole culture, is the thinking, this. And they said the thoughts change. The thoughts don't mean anything. You know, I've seen so many lives ruined at the clinic when people are like, yeah, I had this deep gut feeling or impulse to do this. And sometimes that's like the worst thing you could imagine. I had this patient.
Yeah.
So we live right near Mount Baker, great ski hill, right? And so he was snowboarding and he said, man, it was the perfect day. It was a whiteout. And I saw this jump and everything in my body was like, let's do it. So I did it. And it turned out to be a 70-foot cliff. And so his first leg broke against a tree limb, which broke his other leg. And then as he hit the ground, he broke his spine. And so he's basically overnight like this. And then they find him the next morning. And he said, you know, basically, he's like, it was almost like this compulsion. And I thought it was like, he said, I thought it was a great idea. And I said, no, it's just an impulse. You can't confuse an impulse with direction. And he said, well, that was the thing I never did. And now lifelong, he's going to live with that.
Ugh. Gee whiz. Moral of the story, don't go skiing after a whiteout if you're not fully familiar with the terrain. Oh my God, that's a whole nother conversation. I've watched some of those crazy extreme rescue shows with my wife.
Oh, totally.
Probably filmed out in that Washington, some of them out by those big mountainous regions and ski areas of the West. And it's just outrageous. People get buried alive, literally. Oh man, frightening. Okay, different conversation completely, but certainly
a good one though.
Certainly a good one. Gosh darn. So, but that was somebody coming to you. Was that somebody coming to you seeking your help for your practice?
Yeah, they just had an unrelenting nerve pain from some spinal cord injury, and then they had lost most of their feeling in their legs, and so we started working. And my clinic's different. Like, we do everything in a treatment plan. So it's very much as if you were in Taiwan or Korea. In the States, so much of complementary medicine is just you kind of show up and the practitioner says, well, when do you want to come back? And we're guys, right? And we're American dudes. So we're like, never. So,
right.
It's just like, if you give it to me, I'm not going to see you again. Whereas in Korea, it's like, I'll see you every day for 6 days in a row. I don't work on Sundays, and then we'll see you again until you're 80% better. Same thing in Taiwan. Wow. And so everyone in my clinic is on a treatment plan. So I worked with him for a 4-month section to get rid of the nerve pain. And then at the end of the 4 months, he said, it's odd. And I said, what? He says, I'm feeling parts of my leg again. And this was a long time ago. This was 20 years ago, at least. And I said, well, that's interesting. So we continued to work, and we got 70% of the feeling back in his legs. And at the time, I wasn't sure what was happening, but we know now for a fact through the study of the central nervous system, it is true that nerves die and don't come back, but it's also true if you increase oxygen flow, decrease inflammation, you can encourage new nerve growth. That's how that kid got his feeling back. And so at that point, I started to think about, well, okay, there's so much more happening here than even science can explain. What do the masters do, right? What historically has worked? because I've got 2,800 years of research I can dive into for Chinese acupuncture and herbs. And so it was like one of my teachers taught me many years ago. He said, he says, if you study Buddhism from 1,000 years ago, he says, their understanding of physics still is ahead of ours.
It's amazing.
It really is. Because when you're looking at all this stuff, in a sense, it doesn't make sense. Like something that stumps science to this day. And really, when you get down to it, it's a conversation stopper, is when they're studying the brain, in theory, there should be an impulse, and then we should speak. But the speech precedes the impulse, and they can't come to terms with that. It's a quandary, because the impulse should fire the speech, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so really when you get down to it, you can say, well, if the impulse isn't firing the speech, what is then? And it's just dead silence.
Well, I mean, now you got me scratching my head here. I didn't know I was going to...
That's a tough one. Because that one, I mean, really, if you dive into that, like one East Indian cave dweller I studied with, he just said, our head's a radio antenna collecting thoughts. He says, that's it. We think it's ourself, but he says, it's just a series of thoughts that we form into a personality. But he says, really, we're just picking up stuff. And it sounds kind of crazy, but how does that not agree with what science is showing? And that's the part where it gets really odd. And I love that terrain.
Fascinating. You obviously do quite a bit at your practice. I didn't realize there's so many different types of acupuncture. You have a lot of styles to your name, and certainly, your background and learning over in the East and bringing it over this way is really something. We don't have to get into all of it, but how do you decide, or is it people that come to you seeking a certain style or type, or is it you kind of diagnosing their issue and kind of from your experience treating them in a certain way or with a particular method? I don't, think of me as very much a beginner when it comes to any of this information. So, and probably our listeners as well. Hey, what does that look like for a traditional patient that comes in?
Yeah, so my mentor, Bob Doan, and I have been studying pulse diagnosis. We're literally palpating the radial artery, and what we feel under our fingers is the blood flow through certain organs in the body. And they're studying this at University of Washington right now. We're very good at looking at before it's symptomatic, issues with the heart. Before it's symptomatic, issues with the liver. I can diagnose the difference between inflammatory caused pain or poor blood flow causing pain. And so we kind of cheat at the clinic. When a patient comes into me, we do a 15-minute meet or greet. I take their pulse. And when I'm taking their pulse, I'm saying, for example, if you have poor blood flow to the heart, you don't sleep well, you're highly anxious, and your thoughts go round and round. And if the patient looks at me and goes, yeah, that's exactly what's happening, they're a fit. If I take that and they're like, yeah, no, not really, they're either in denial or I'm wrong. Either way, there's not a fit for that. And so last year, I was kind of thinking about this. A patient asked me, they said, you're still here? And I said, yeah, I've been there 24 years. I said, yeah. And they said, how many patients have you seen? And I thought, I don't know. So I looked it up. So I can't tell how many patients, but I can tell how many patient visits. Like, so when I'm treating somebody, they're coming to see me 2 times a week, once a week, 3 times a week.
Right.
But as far as individual patient visits, we're over 100,000 at this point. And so when you look at that body of work, it's pretty wild to sit back and, like you just said, what can you do, or what do you do? And we're extremely good at matching up issues with the pulse and getting them to 80% function.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's
but the trade-off
crazy.
is it takes time. It takes money. You're talking 4 months of twice a week. You're easily talking $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000. And so I had patients complain. Like last year, a patient said, "Oh, that's too much." And I said, "Well, you're self-employed like I am. Yeah. How much are you paying for that health insurance each month?" And they're like, "Oh, about $800. And I said, "If you were my patient, I would fire myself. Look what you've got for your $800 a month. It's ridiculous."
Yeah. We were having this conversation a matter of days ago or weeks ago. I just recently had minor surgery on my knee to repair a torn meniscus. Very kind of basic in and out outpatient procedure. But I get 3 different bills that are going to be coming to me from the practice, from the doctor himself, from the anesthesiologist, and all that stuff. And it's still going to cost me out of pocket thousands of dollars. And then we were talking about how hard it is sometimes if you're in network or you have this primary or care or HMO or PPO or whatever, all these different things. And you go, gosh, wouldn't it just be smarter if you just had a fund that that was contributed to on your behalf, and then when you had medical issues come up, you pull money from that fund rather than it just feeling like every month you're donating hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars if you have a family insurance plan to this. And what are you getting from it? As you said, like, what are you really seeing from that? Are you just hoping and praying that you don't have a need? That no one gets hurt or gets sick, or are you feeling good? Like, hey, we have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in this fund. And then when we need it, it's there to pull from.
And that fund would dramatically reduce costs.
Oh, big time.
Right? Because if you go to a medical center and it's coming out of your pocket, you're not going to spend $4,000 on 2 hours of care. I mean, we took my daughter to Children's Hospital. That was $5,000 for 3 hours of useless information.
Yeah.
All out of pocket.
It's really gotten to while we do a lot of things right here in our country, I feel like we've gotten a lot of things wrong, or things have gotten a little bit out of control, where the medical structure, big pharma and all that stuff has really just gotten to the point where just it's outrageous. People are just can't believe the costs of things, right? How many thousands of dollars. I rode in an ambulance for 20 minutes, and now I'm paying a bill for $5,000 for. It's going to take me years to pay that off, and that's not even talking about why I was in the ambulance, right? It's just the expense for things is just so outrageous, and that's obviously what you're looking to try and combat in your own way with your practice, and have been for over 20 years. Is giving people natural alternatives to chronic illness and chronic inflammation, and helping them navigate through pain and discomfort, and keeping them off maybe prescription meds. And I mean, that's a whole nother realm of legal drug use. I can go on about this forever. The multitude of commercial that is dedicated to drugs and hooking people on this and get on this and get on that and overcome this with that. And all it is Band-Aid fixes. None of this is designed to fix your problem. None of it. It's designed to help you maybe cope with it, or, kind of get through life with it still, but it's not there to fix your issue at all. And that's what you're doing. You're actually trying to fix people. At the cellular, it's easy for me to say, cellular level, right? You're trying to get down to the nitty gritty and really heal people.
Yeah, it was so interesting. So when I lived in South Korea, I was the first American in this tiny little town, right? And so there was a town called Ulsan. It was, off on the coast, and they had an Irish pub there. And I was like, every once in a while, I was like, I need my Guinness.
Really? Irish pub in South Korea?
Totally. This is in the 90s, right? I mean, it was wild. Okay. And so I went there and I was having my stout, talking to the bartender. He had a little bit of English. And this guy comes over and he's in a suit and he sits down, Western guy, right? And then the first thing out of his mouth, and the bartender's Korean right in front of us, is he's just like, I hate these people. And I'm like, what?
Oh, boy.
So the bartender looks at me, looks at him, and just walks away. I'm like, I used to be a journalist, right? So I love messing with people. I wanted to hear this guy's story. It was just like, this is too good to pass up. I was like, well, so what's up? And he's just like, well, I'm a pharmaceutical rep. And I was just like, okay. He's like, I was giving a presentation at Samsung.
No wonder he hates these people. Sorry.
Totally,
right?
I don't know that this is true, but my feeling was he was part of that initial wave to try to convert Korea to drugs for health, right? I don't know. I'm sure there are people before him. But anyways, he says, I'm giving this thing, this talk on migraine medication. And, I got very interested because I suffered from migraines from a car accident when I was 16. That's a much, much different story than this. And so he says, I'm in the middle of my presentation. And then this guy's just like, stop speaking. So that sounds very Korean. And he says, it seems like the side effect of your medication is death. And he's like, possible death. And he says, I never had any employee die of migraine. Get out of my office. It kicked him out. I can't stop
Oh, my
laughing.
God.
I just
That
giggled.
is phenomenal.
Yeah, I just laughed. And the guy is just like, he's like, you're one of them. And I was just like, I'm like, sure, I'll sign up. So, yeah, this war has been going forever. And the worst thing about these medications, now, look, my daughter, she's type 1 diabetic. She's on insulin. Without that, she'd be dead. I'm thankful for the Canadian that invented that. Thank you, Canada. And my wife's Canadian,
Right.
See, husband points. But every drug that isn't made by our body has to be basically run through the kidney, liver. And that's why all these drugs, you take this, but it destroys your liver function. You take this, it destroys your kidney function. Like all my patients who have kidney disease, a lot of them have hypertension. The chief side effects of hypertension medication are damaging the kidneys. That makes no sense. If you're telling me this is how you treat it by further damaging what's causing it, we've lost our way.
Right.
And
that's my point. That's my point
Yeah.
here. It's not a general bashing of Western medicine. While there are benefits and we need emergency medicine, of course we do. We need life-saving tactics. We need things that people have chronic things that, like as you mentioned, your daughter, if they're diabetic and they have needs, yes. If you're deficient in something, yes, I get it. But it's this overarching, like, let's get people on long-term medication, right? Rather than looking to solve the problem. Why do they even need it in the first place? That's my pain point.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I've had patients call me, hey, I just got into a car accident. Should I come in? And I'm like, no, dude, you should go to the hospital. They are good at accidents. They are good at emergency medicine. I'm terrible at it. You go in, you give me all the data, I'll fix you afterwards. And off they go. And that's
right.
how
if you have a knife wound or a broken bone or whatever, please seek,
don't come.
Go to the orthopedist, go to the emergency room, do what you need to do. However,
or like you with your torn meniscus, there's no amount of natural anything that's going to fix that. It's just like people, just figure out what you do, stay in your lane.
Exactly. And oddly enough, and I won't name who did the procedure or anything, he's very highly decorated, very popular, has done a lot of work for pro athletes over the years. His walls are covered with autographs from countless people in athletics and sports. So I trusted his hand. I trusted his experience. He's been at this for decades, so I knew I was in good hands. Following the procedure and my follow-up this week, I could sense, though, a desire for me to continue to go to him for, long-term care or shots for ongoing treatments and things like that. While I'm willing to review the information to see if there's anything there for me, I have no desire to stay on any kind of long-term care. I had a tear based on an injury. The tear's been fixed. I will do the exercises I need to strengthen that area again, and then get back to doing what I need to do to keep my body fit and strong. I have no desire to continue to go back or hope I get a knee replacement at some point. I don't think I'm even a candidate for something like that. But I think some people live in that world where they feel like, ooh, I need to, like, surgery is never a good, it's the bottom line. It's the, if I have to, I will, but it should never be like a, maybe I should go get surgery. Like, you don't want people cutting into you and replacing parts. And, what God gave us is pretty fantastic, and we need to do whatever we can and to fight for it. And not necessarily, I don't know. I guess I'm getting off track a little bit, but I think so many people are just immediately will give in to, anything that a physician or a doctor recommends or says, when they're kind of taking all the accountability kind of comes away from them and just goes onto the medical practitioners to decide for you what you need to do. And I think that's where it can get a little bad.
Totally. I just had this conversation on Wednesday with a patient. They said, okay, in a nutshell, I love talking philosophy, spirituality, medicine with my patients. They want to talk politics. Fine, I don't care. It's like we just talk about everything. And they said, what do you know about Eastern and Western society that you think is really puzzling? And I said, okay, this is an easy one. And they said, all right. I said, if you go back to the roots of Western civilization, when the hero didn't know what to do, they'd go see the oracle. They'd get the answer, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, that doesn't really sound like independence to me. That doesn't sound like independent thought. That sounds like, tell me what to do, I'll do it. And they said, okay. I said, in the Eastern tradition, when you have a question, you climb up to the mountain, you ask the hermit, and he leaves you with more questions. And they said, well, what does that mean? I said, figure it out for yourself. I said, but from the outset, right, we think of the Western independent individual thinkers. I don't know that that's true. Like you said, you give your power to the surgeon. You'll give your power to whoever. In the Chinese tradition, we're all like, oh, they just followers. They're just this. At the root of their tradition is you have to come up with your own answer because no one has your specific answer. And so I think I live within those two zones constantly, but I'm always leaning into that, come up with my own answer. It's like we have a saying in Chinese medicine, for every book, 100 patients, for every patient, no book.
Wow.
It's like,
that's cool.
Yeah. It's like meditation. Like people will say to me, like, meditation, how does that work for you? Or I can't do it. It doesn't work. How many people have told you that? I tried meditation. It just doesn't work.
Just doesn't work. Right. How long did you try? How long did you go for it?
or what technique did you try? Right.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Right. And so it's, I don't know if we have time for this.
I tried eating healthier. It didn't work for me. I tried exercising more. I couldn't really get into it. It's like we're quick in this culture anymore to throw towel in.
Totally.
And throw our hands up in frustration because we're so used to our ROI is so quick anymore. Return on investment, right? We're used to instant results. Instant, fast food in a minute, right? And take a pill and feel better. And we're used to quick return. And sometimes, if it's really worthwhile, it's not that quick. It's gonna take a little bit of time and frustration. I have a great lesson actually in this, and I've been coaching baseball. I told you this, Scott, weeks ago when we spoke. I coach baseball, and I learned a lot of lessons from this, from coaching 12-year-olds, and I absolutely love it, and I've had some really terrific teams in recent years and great success. And And I only attribute that to trying to be a constant learner and learning from other coaches how to be a better coach and learning from the kids how to be a better leader. And the other day we did a drill that the coaches, one of the coaches shared it in our little group text, and it was, oh, that's a cool drill. Yeah, I like that variation of kind of similar stuff that we've done, but never that one. And so I said, okay, we're going to do a new drill tonight. And I'm getting the drill going. And there was frustration amongst the kids and the coaches because we weren't sure the movement of the kids, how it flowed, how they filtered in and out of this drill. And we weren't getting it. And even looking at the video and then watching, okay, the kids are flowing this way, the ball goes here, this kid peels off, and this kid goes here. And we couldn't get it for about 5 minutes, almost 10 minutes. And the kids are angry, and the coaches are a little frustrated. I'm like, hold on. Okay, let's look again. And I'm like, let's not give up on this, you know? And then sure enough, after a couple more tries, we got it. And we got the flow, and where the kids have to feed in to the drill and feed out and get back in line and do all this. And then we got success with it. And afterwards, it was a good lesson. I brought everybody over and I said, listen, guys, I said, I could have just thrown up my hands after 5 or 10 minutes when we were frustrated that we didn't get the drill, like we weren't getting it, and just gone to something that we knew how to do. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted us to fight through that pain point and realize, oh, okay, now we got it. And then it flowed beautifully, and it looked like we've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
Once we got it. And it was a good lesson that, you don't just give up on something. Don't give up on yourself just because maybe in a week or two you're not seeing the results from something. It might take a month, 2 months, or 3 months. You shouldn't be losing more than a pound a week if you're doing it right. Health, doing it the right way. So that means only a month, you might only lose 4 pounds. What are you going to lose in a year?
Exactly.
If you did that.
Yep. That's
right? I'm talking about lifestyle change. That's what I like about what you're doing. Your treatment plans don't come just see me once in a while when you're not feeling right. It's like, let me get you on something that's actually going to get you where you want to be in the next 4 to 6 months. Then maybe you don't have to come see me ever again.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's funny because I don't have the time in my clinic for the dabblers. And I just upfront tell them hey, this is not a Band-Aid clinic. If you're looking for that, you got 20, 30, 40 different people to do it. And then out they go. They're happy. I'm happy. And, I think if people were a lot more upfront at the beginning, we'd have a lot less, meandering and wasting of time.
Oh, I'm sure you get the dabblers. Yeah.
They never make it past that first 15 minutes. I'm pretty blunt.
Well,
I'm just like, okay, why are you here? Oh, my wife sent me. Well, go to Starbucks. You'll have more fun.
You're right. Go get an iced coffee. You'll probably, that'll make you feel better than just coming in here for one day. Yeah.
Totally. But what's funny, man? It was like when you were talking earlier, like what I listened to for are correspondences, right? And so here I am talking about, adversity. And then you're like, hey, that was part of the morning huddle this morning. Right. And I'm like, yeah. We're in sync. We're on the right track. And so this morning, one of my favorite artists is Frank Turner. He just released an album called Undefeated. And this whole time we were talking, I'm like, that's Frank Turner right there, Frank Turner. So I love this type of stuff when it circles around. This is the stuff to me that lets me know, we're on track. We're finding that harmony, right? We're not these voices in the wilderness. It's just, it gives me the goosebumps, a feeling of awe.
Yeah. No, it really is. It really is great when you're in sync or in line with somebody, and you just feel like you hit the ground running. And I think, you getting back to talking about the practice of meditation and leaving yourself open to those quiet moments, making time for yourself in a world that is just moving at an alarming speed. Here we are. We're recording this early May of 2024. I don't even know how we got here. Yesterday was January. Seriously. We're at breakneck speed. I'm in a time in my life from, my kids and the busyness of my work and activities, and I can't even barely breathe. And then I feel like I'm not getting to this, I'm not getting to that, I'm not getting to this, and we're doing a lousy job, a lot of us, including myself, at making time for ourselves, for our health, and for our clarity, as you said, clarity. How has this traditional Eastern philosophy, what is it doing for people, for you specifically, or for others that you're aware of, in terms of balancing mood, balancing emotion, helping with mental well-being? How has that really affected, obviously you on a personal level, but other people? Like, how is that joining up also with the work that you're doing, right? It seems like there's massive overlap. Are you getting people kind of like going down that road who are all seeking you help for acupuncture? Are they kind of dabbling in or going down that road of meditation as well?
Yeah. So like one of my teachers, Dr. Tron, he said, basically when I ran into him, he was kind of ending his teaching career. He'd always talked about when I retire, I'm going to go back to France and look at the ocean. And I got to see him for a few years before he finally did that.
Wow.
He was a great guy, man. He used to carry 3 cigarettes in his pocket. And I asked him, I said, so what do you do with those cigarettes? And he goes, oh, I love smoking so much. And he'd be sipping his wine. And then, this is at the dinners. And there's all these new age vegetarian, vegan people who don't drink, don't smoke. And here I am, this barbarian sitting with the master, drinking wine with him, talking about smoking. And so he says, I do it for my willpower. He says, I take those 3 cigarettes out and I stare at them. And he says, and I time myself 5 minutes. And he says, and I just look at them and I want them. He says, I think my will is like a muscle. And I said, interesting. And you know what? They've proven that if you exercise your will, it gets stronger. And so,
for sure.
What I bring him up is he said, when I first started, almost all my cases were pain, back pain, neck pain. He says, but as we're going forward in time, he says, we're seeing more and more issues with the mood. He says, the human spirit, he says, is the majority of what I'm seeing in my practice. And he says, and I think this trend will continue. And this was in the early 2000s, right? And so he asked me, he says, Scott, what do you treat? And I said, mostly back pain. And I love this guy. He was so rigorous. He's like, I don't care what you think. Tell me the data. And I said, okay. So I went back to my clinic and I started researching it. And then, what the number one thing I was treating in the early 2000s is fatigue. Everyone's dead tired on their feet. And then I looked at it and I thought, okay, people come in here with pain. They've all got fatigue. They've all got anxiety, stress, or depression. And so I really started looking at that and going, wow, this is it was an epidemic before the pandemic. And so when patients come in, just as an aside here, there's basically 3 levels of function. You can picture like a graph, right, in percents. So when you're above 70%, the body's in a state of vitality. That means you get hit with something, it hurts, you get back the next day unscathed, you're back to 0. Between 70 and 30, the body's getting better or worse. Below 30, we're in that symptomatic phase. So here's the danger. So during the pandemic, we stayed open the entire time. We didn't close a single day. We just kept rocking and rolling. So in the pandemic, I think at the time we were one of the only natural health clinics open in certainly in Whatcom County. Everyone else,
wow,
had a different idea, a different plan. But the Taiwanese had already told me, this is what we do to keep us safe, our patients safe. Here's how we treat it, all this kind of stuff. So anyways, my patients who were in that 70%, we had no deaths, no suicides, no hospitalizations, no heart attacks. My incoming patients below 30% set records in every category. And at that point, it really hit me. It's like, if you are close to that line and something big happens, you will go flying off.
Wow. So obviously this comes down to then, it in a lot of ways, it's lifestyle, right? And how we approach things, how we face things, how we, some people have really armed themselves well, if you will, in their first 30, 40, 50 years with paying attention to some stuff, so that if they do get hit with something big, some type of major health crisis or trauma, that they're able to overcome, as you said. However, there's a lot of people that have spent so many decades ignoring the signs and the warnings and stuff that are out there for them, not picking up on it, that when that catastrophic event occurs, they're in that 30% or, area, and they, like you said, they go flying off. Like their bodies are not equipped to handle that blow.
It's worse. It's their mind, their heart.
Right. Wow. And obviously the two are connected, very much so. How we treat our body really affects how we think and our brain function, but then how we think really impacts the body too. I mean, it's that cyclical type of relationship there, but it's so. What are some simple things maybe that you could tell someone right now listening who really, again, entry level, beginner level type stuff? No, it's people who are like, meditation, that's not for me. I've never done that. I've heard about it. I think people are cuckoo who do it. What does that look like? Where would someone even begin with such a thing? What's step one?
Yeah, I think step one it is one that I think a lot of people are gonna not like. They're gonna struggle with. You have to put yourself in front of the things in your life. So if you ask any Korean, this was back in the 90s, like, what's your greatest asset? If you ask an American, what do we say? It's our house, it's our account, da-da-da-da-da. They were
it's all material things. Yeah.
It's all garbage, man. But they would say my health, because there's no social services back then. If you were not working, you were on the street. And Big Brother wasn't going to be there to give you a housing and food. And so for them, health was always first. If you ask the monks in the monasteries, what's your greatest resource? 100% exact same story. It's my health. Because you're right, if the body's broken, the mind's going to fracture eventually. So you got to put yourself first. And so when I first came to see my teacher, I was just like, I need help. I need this. And he looked at me and he says, you've been meditating a while. And I said, egotistically, oh yeah, I'm pretty cool.
Oh,
and
yeah,
he says,
good at it.
Really good. And he's just like, well, you don't seem very happy. I said, I'm not. He says, you don't seem calm. You don't seem clear. And he says, okay, you want to do this? You got to hit 3 hours a day.
What?
I was like, 3 hours a day of what? And he says, I'm going to teach you a simple technique. You do it 3 hours a day. If you don't come back. So at this point, right, I've got a clinic. I've got, kids. I was teaching Qigong class, teaching meditation, teaching a cooking with herbs class. Had my clinic, building that up, writing books. I love writing books, novels. I love researching all this stuff. And I went home to my wife and I was just like, holy cow, he wants me to do this for 3 hours a day. And she's like, well, you're miserable. Why not? And so I thought, how am I going to do this? And that loud voice, remember the internal voice? Very clear. You get up an hour and a half early, you stay up an hour and a half later. And so I did that night. And I did that. And so as I was continuing to work with him, about a year in, he's like, you're getting a little bit better. And I said, yeah, I feel a little bit better. And he says, okay, you can keep going. So about 2 years in, he's just like, well, how's it going? And I said, it's going really good. He says, okay, do you want to go down to 2 hours? And I said, yeah, I'll try 2. And so when I hit the 2 hours a day, it just felt what I needed, right? And so why I'm saying all this isn't that you guys out there have to do 2 hours a day.
Oh, people are right now. They've already turned. They might, if they're still listening now, because they heard you say 3 hours. They went, no way, I'm done.
Exactly, I'm out. So luckily, you guys aren't as bad off as I am. So that's the good news. Yeah, right. You're not in the condition I was in, and so all the science shows that even a minute a day is beneficial. Right. It's so if you look at the work of Ken Wilber, he's a great researcher on meditation. He was looking at what's the minimum someone has to do to positively impact their health. And again, it's in 3 to 4 month chunks because that's how long it takes for the brain to adapt to new patterns. So let's just say you're the busiest person in the world. Let's say you're busier than I just said I was. I doubt it, but let's just say you are. You can't tell me you can't carve out 2 minutes a day. It's impossible. If you want to do just a very basic baby step, you just say, great. In the morning, I'm going to meditate for a minute. In the evening, I'm going to meditate for a minute. The technique is simple. You just pick a neutral word like sun. It doesn't matter. Your words, that doesn't matter. Whatever word you like, and you just repeat it. Get in a comfortable position, repeat your word. And then what will happen is you'll be repeating your word, and your mind will wander. And you say, cool, repeat the word. And then what happens is the longer you repeat the word, the less the brain identifies a meaning with that word, the greater space you'll have between your thoughts. That's how it works.
It just becomes a sound that you're making, and you're not. Because when if say sun is the word, right?
Yeah.
If you start using sun, you're going to think of the sun.
Exactly.
And you're probably going to think of what it looks like, what it feels like, right? But after doing it for maybe several minutes, just because you're saying sun, doesn't mean you're thinking about it anymore. Your mind is somewhere else now. And
exactly.
So that's what you're trying to put distance and space between your thoughts and what you're saying.
Exactly, because the mind's never going to stop running. It's impossible, right?
Right.
But if we direct that running, we can direct it in such a way that we can create peace almost instantly. So like if you're telling me, Scott, give me a plan, just do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, and then you just pick your word.
That'd be a good goal, maybe, to start with a minute.
Exactly.
At each time, and then maybe work. Hey, maybe I can get it to 15 on each end, morning and evening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you basically just pick your word and repeat it. Because what I noticed was when I'm following my breath, my mind would just wander too much. It would go all over.
Yes.
If I'm listening to an app, I'm going to start thinking about that music, right? If I'm building a mandala in my mind, I'm going to play with that mandala. And so you don't really want to engage the mind while you're trying to calm it. So by basically rendering that word meaningless, you will have massive gaps where there's no thought. And that's how the body goes into that deep state of rest and digest.
Yeah. And I would imagine location is important here, plays into it. You would want something that's hopefully distraction-free or a little bit quiet. It could be done in your car probably or at your desk, but, maybe something that's, away from people, that's a little bit private would be fitting, right? Quiet, not loud would probably be good, right? I would imagine. I don't know.
Exactly.
Any recommendations there?
Yeah, my recommendation is, figure out your time is going to be more important than your location, because the location's always going to change. Like years ago, it was so funny, man. I had 2 patients in 2 rooms, and this is no joke. One was a nationally known yoga teacher, and one was like a corporate raider. Like he was like international businessman. And I'm sitting laughing at these two, right? Like, how different can you get? And so out of nowhere, they start doing construction in our courtyard. No warning, no anything. And you hear this hammer going ding, 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 ding. And I'm like, oh, geez, this is not good. So I go into the yoga room. And that lady is, get these needles out of me. You're not charging me for this. And off she went. And I was just kind of like, man, if it's this bad, what's the next room going to be, right, with corporate Joe Rader? I go in there, and he's just perfectly content. And I say, is the noise bothering you? And he says, I'm here to get better, not to worry about the noise.
Wow.
That blew my mind, man, because here's this person, their whole career has been teaching everyone bliss and love and all this rubbish, but you put any adversity to them and they absolutely crumble. So it's funny. It's like, get your spot, and when stuff comes in and intrudes on your spot, you're just going to bring that into your word. Oh, yeah, I'm aware that there's noise outside, and you repeat your word. Yeah. You ever hear of the monks of Mount Athos? These
Mount
great,
Athos?
Yeah, the part of Greece, and they have a form of perpetual prayer, perpetual meditation. So they do the Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. It's a repetitive prayer that they never stop. That's exactly what they do in the mountains of India, by the way. They have a word, like I'm telling you, a word they repeat. And there's this great interview with Dan Rather, and he's interviewing this monk, and Dan Rather says to the guy, well, don't you feel bad that you have to stop meditating? Because that's why you're here, the 24-hour-a-day, meditation, to spend time with me. And the monk gives out this great laugh, and he joyfully looks at him and says, what gave you the impression I'm not meditating now? So that's all I do. Anytime I'm aware, I just repeat my phrase. Anytime I'm aware at all that I have a human form, I repeat my phrase. And when you do that long enough, the phrase comes without you summoning it. And so... Right.
It's running in the background. Yeah.
Totally. I was waiting for a patient, and they came in, and she says, you look so peaceful, because I'm normally hyper. I'm moving, right? And she says, you look so peaceful. What were you thinking about? And I said, I just became aware of my prayer in the background. And she's like, what do you mean? And I said, you know how, like, you're sitting there and you're worried about being late because, your practitioner hates people being late? She's like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I said, well, my automatic is this beautiful prayer. And she said, can you teach me that technique again? And then we had to talk about what we just did. So, the mind is a tool, and I 100% believe it's ours to master, not to be held hostage by.
Wow. That is something. I mean, if nothing else, having a moment of letting yourself create some space between your thoughts and the distractions of life, but then to also establish some kind of background music, if you will, to your mind, to your thoughts, that is something that is meaningful and gives you a sense of peace and or comfort. And it's just kind of, if you do it enough, as you just said, Scott, it just kind of shows up throughout your day, and is probably pretty cool. That it's like, you ever, we've all experienced this. That song that you hear first in the morning has a tendency to kind of be in your head the rest of the day. And so I think it's much like that with what you're saying with meditation, is whatever your phrase is or your word, and make it something that really gives you joy or gives you peace. And if you're meditating on that, when it does just kind of show up unconsciously or subconsciously, I guess would be more appropriate, that it's a calming thing for you, and kind of gives you, like you said, like kind of makes you smile or makes you feel, a little bit more calm in a moment. Because we're all struggling with the stressors of life. I know I am, and some people seem to just, on the exterior at least, handle it better than others. But I think everybody tries to put on their best face, even if they are struggling. But I know, as you've said, I mean, it was just a couple decades ago, people were coming to you and it was mostly for fatigue and energy problems. And now I think it continues to be an issue for people, along with just anxiety and stress, and massive depression. I feel like a wave has hit people over the last 5 years.
Yeah, one question my teachers used to always ask me, and this was, I was in my young 30s at the time. Now I'm in my 50s. They would ask me, even in my 30s, they would say, how are you managing your resources? And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, basically your heart, your mind, these are your resources, your body, your physical health. And they said, you need to stockpile as much as possible because as you age, the hits are harder to come back from. And so that's why, like my one teacher, he said basically like, what do you do in the morning to get ready for life? And I said, I meditate. And he's like, well, do you stretch your body? Do you stretch your mind? And I said, well, no, I do. I go to martial arts class. I do that at night. And he says, yeah, that's not going to work. He says, you need a system to get ready for your day. He says, you're only 30 right now. You don't really need it. But at 70, you do, which he was. And at 80, you certainly do. And he says, you'll probably need an extra hour per day per decade. And then now that I'm in my 50s, right, I get up, I do my meditation, and I do my walk. After the walk, I do my yoga, do my stretching, do all these things. I do my daily readings. And so a couple hours later, I feel like I'm ready. Like I'm ready for whoever comes in the door. No matter what comes at me, I'm going to hit it, and it's going to be good. Yeah. And I think without that beginning and end of the night, I'd be in the noise that I see all day. But that system is like my armor, man. It's like I will not give that up for anything. Yeah.
I feel like it has a two-pronged effect or a twofold effect on you. Number one, it gives you a sense of accomplishment, even if that's not why you're doing it. But, I've heard famous speeches from like admirals or, that say, that one of the simplest and most beneficial thing people can do is make their bed.
Exactly. Make your bed. I love that.
You start your day off with an accomplishment and something that is satisfying, right? And you feel like I've achieved, even as small as it can be. So on one level, there's that. And also, I think it's toughening you up to and disciplining you, right? To do something that's habit forming, that's beneficial. It gives you, it disciplines you, and it makes you tougher. It just makes you a tougher person. You talk to anybody that's high achieving. I was listening to Joe Rogan, one of his many fascinating interviews that he has, but he was talking about his ritual things that he does. And the first thing he does is the hardest thing he says of the day is I do that cold plunge for 3 minutes. And he's like, I hate it. I hate every second of it. But he goes, but the rest of my day is easy compared to that 3 minutes. And I'm like, gosh, if more people just did stuff like that, right? It's a mind shift. It toughens you up.
And I think it also helps, like how much suffering do we put ourselves in by not doing what we need to do? Like that's endless. Whereas if you go, like I do the same thing, the cold shower, the meditation, but unlike Joe, I am training myself to love it.
Right. Now, maybe on some level he is loving it. It's a love-hate relationship, but it's definitely, you're definitely thinking about when am I getting out of here? Not, it's not a nice hot shower that you don't want to turn off,
Totally. You know what I do, man? As soon as that cold hits and it's like the good one, I tell myself, here comes the truth. Yeah. Right? I love cold. I love snow. And I love that feeling. And so when my body hits that, I just make myself smile in the beginning. And I say, oh, here comes the truth. And then now I don't even have to do that. As soon as that hits, it's like my nervous system goes, whoom, and I'm ready and I'm already smiling. And then boom. It's like with weight loss people. The people who lose weight are the people who say, I learned to push away the food and smile. In the beginning, I did not believe that that was fun or happy.
Yeah.
But those people that take that, I want this, push it away, and make themselves smile, you can reprogram the brain to like that.
Yes,
Those are the ones that do it.
One of those things that can be so powerful, as simple as it can be, from the making of your bed to maybe reading for 10 minutes or meditating for a minute at a time, and build on that to 2 and to 5, and who knows what it can become. But there's such strength found in those moments of discipline, and at first things aren't easy, but you can come to enjoy it. You can come to look forward to those moments because they're your moments, and you can be proud of that.
You know, like Stoics always say, you know, why be concerned with obstacles? That is the way. Right?
Right. That's right.
It's funny.
The hero's journey is wrought with obstacle, and if it wasn't, it wouldn't really be worth knowing about, right? So
be nothing to talk about.
There'd be nothing to talk about. I know, man. This is fun. I really appreciate your wisdom and your experience. There's so much that we could have talked about, and which it really appeals to me to have you back on the podcast in the near future, because I feel like there's so much more that we can get into and cover. Plus, I mean, there's so much with your own personal health crisis that you've faced in recent times, and that I would love to dig into more. So will you promise to be back on the show if I'll have you?
Oh man, I'd love it. That'd be great. I've had a blast. And if anybody out there has questions about any of this stuff, just write in. I'll be happy to help.
Oh, for sure. Now, where's a great place for people? Obviously, I have your website if you want to give that out, and if there's anything else that people should go to seek some information about you, Scott.
Yeah, you know, if you just probably Google my name, Scott Paglia, Paglia. That's probably easiest. Or Chris, do you guys have like a comment section under these when you do them? Like when you release them?
Well, it depends on where it's released. Certainly on our YouTube channel, there's a comment section for the podcast that goes on YouTube, or on any social media platforms where assets are shared.
Cool.
People could email certainly to the Strong by Design podcast seeking more information. But
yeah. Because you know what would be fun, man, is if we got people who started doing this, and the next time we did this, we could answer their questions. That'd be super fun.
Well, I'll tell you, I do ask for the questions to come in from past guests, past episodes, really, because it does make for a fun, maybe Q&A style episode where you can tackle stuff that, you know, came in from people, from listeners of the show. So yes, I encourage anyone listening, if you have more questions for Scott, get them to us somehow. We have a lot of platforms that you can certainly put that question, and we'd love to hear from you and add that into our future conversation. But yeah, I definitely want to have Scott back on. It's Scott, Paglia, Paglia. And you know, I apologize for pronouncing it incorrectly earlier.
No worries.
That's an oversight on my behalf. I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard that.
Yeah.
But it's been really just a pleasure to be talking with you today. I look forward certainly to connecting again. And if you want a little bit more information about what Scott does in his practice, you can also go to BellinghamAcupunctureCenter.com. That's his platform. You can read about him, see pictures of him, and get to know what he's doing on the acupuncture side of things. But I love the meditation conversation, and start small and build on it, and create some space there in your mind. And I think that'd be great. Scott, a true pleasure. Listeners, another terrific episode here on Strong by Design. I think we just scratched the surface today, really getting to know Scott and his background. So we will definitely have him back. So much more to talk about. Leave 5-star rating if you would, or a review on whatever platform you listen. We appreciate that. Send in some questions, and we'll see if we can tackle those on a future episode. We'll talk with you soon. God bless. Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.